Okay, we're now having the critique of the debate on this House would offer Ukraine membership into NATO. Go for it.
Hooray. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start with opening government. First off, why did you guys define the House as the U.S. government? Walk me through that process. Like, what were you guys thinking? Was it just the standard? Okay.
When we were talking about
common practice.
We don't know all the NATO countries, so we try to consider benefits for all.
Yeah. Sorry. Does anyone know how many? I don't know. How many
Off the top of my head, I was like plus 20.
Is it?
I was going to guess like 30.
It's in the higher 20s. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Okay, so that's fine. Just one thing to keep in mind is that the United States can't offer Ukraine membership in NATO. NATO has to offer Ukraine membership in NATO. So, I mean, while we are certainly the driving force behind NATO, something to keep in mind that we don't actually run NATO. I think that kind of puts you at a disadvantage because then you're having to argue solely from the U.S.'s perspective, and then we get some things from the other side of the House and in the back half of the debate about the effects that this plan would have on other nations in NATO, right? So, I mean, when you do something like that, sure, it helps you out in the beginning, but when you get to the back half of the debate, we're discussing completely different impacts, completely different disadvantages, and you guys are kind of left out of the round. So, something to keep in mind that you want to take the broader base view of it. You have a number on it? 28. All right, so
Yeah, and Lamb, there's a prejudice against in BP of having the House always be the U.S. There's more of a prejudice toward it being Western liberal democracies and that sort of thing. So when in doubt, go broader. Okay.
By going broad, should we define the House as something broader, or not define the House?
You have to define the House.
You don't have to define the House. You don't have to define the House. It's not a necessary thing, especially in something like this. I think it's kind of inherently implied. So, I mean, we're talking about NATO. NATO is a self-sustaining organization. I mean, self-sustaining as much as we give them money. But NATO is the one that's going to have to offer membership for Ukraine. So if there's an offer being made, it's kind of inherent and implied that NATO is this House. I mean, you could go to the UN. I mean, you can define it however you want, but you want to define it as fairly and as broadly as possible. Because if you try to narrow the definition of the House, all you're doing is disadvantaging this side of the House. So it makes for a bad debate.
Or you corner yourself. Which I think
or you end up cornering yourself. It does backfire sometimes.
I think that's more what happens.
That's what GMOs.
Yeah, but either way, when you do that, though, the judges are going to hold opening government responsible. So if there's ever, like, just for general rule, if you're ever in a debate and the debate goes poorly and there's no clash, opening government's going to get the full judgment. I mean, opening government is usually the one that takes the blame for a bad debate. Not saying this was a bad debate, it wasn't great, but, I mean, let's just say it wasn't, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay, I got one more thing for Lamb if you're done with him.
Well, I was going to go, I was kind of addressing things in a broader sense to begin with. So that was an okay case. I mean, you got some good definitions out in the beginning. Like I said, I understand where you were going, with the idea of spreading the idea of democracy, construct political alliances, political benefit to the U.S. So that's fine. And you can still discuss the political benefits to the U.S. even if this House is defined as NATO, right? Because we're the primary member of NATO. We run NATO. So you could still have included that. You handled POIs fairly well. I'd still like to see more signposting for you through your case. Because you give me this nice roadmap right at the top, but then you don't actually incorporate that through your speech. So it's like I have this nice, organized block at the top, and then just jumble this down here. So try to make sure that you point out those signposts and indicate, hey, this is where I'm switching to this next line of argument a little bit more clearly. It'll help me as a judge. Professor?
Well, just to finish that line of thought, Lamps, more specifically, if you say there's going to be 3 benefits, then number them that way and say, so now the second benefit and the third benefit. My problem with just benefits to the U.S. is, remember, let's just do a little history lesson. Remember, Ukraine had nukes and gave them up voluntarily with promises that if Russia attacked them, NATO and the U.S. would come to their aid. What a bad joke, right? They gave up their nukes voluntarily, and they had some really heavy deterrence going on. So now let's look at it from their perspective. They want some protection again. See, so there's benefits for them, is what I'm saying. Anyway, the only other thing I want to say to you is please don't interrupt all of you in the middle of your argument to take a POI. Some of you you get flustered when you see a Nika stand up. She's a formative presence, or I'm just using her as an example. But okay, what? No bullshit. Wave them off.
Yeah, I mean,
Justin's very good at waving me off. You should take
Yeah.
notice of him.
I mean, this is a rule.
Practice this at home.
I mean, let's just make sure that this is reiterated. You guys need to take at least 1 POI per speech.
Yeah.
But try not to take more than 2. If you're taking more than 2, you look weak, you look on the
Yeah.
defensive. You're not constructing your case, right? You're not getting a chance to put out your thoughts and where you want to argue. You're instead on the defense responding. So that's why you don't want to handle 3 or 4 or 5 more POIs. So let's just go ahead and stick with open government. We'll move over to you. Well, you started off with this idea of you pointed to North Korea, but then kind of never expanded on that. I'm kind of curious where you were going with that.
Oh, you're skipping a mod. You're
Well, we're just going to do government.
Okay, all right. Okay,
it's
good.
just easier that way.
Okay.
I was going with they threatened our democracy and our rights by, saying we can't have freedom of speech or by playing this movie or they're going to attack.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to relate it with Russia is threatening to attack.
Okay.
And it's our duty to fight for our beliefs.
Okay, so basically not backing down and,
Right.
when someone threatening our values or what
Yeah, I
we
guess
do.
I
Okay.
didn't fully flesh it
The
out.
movie was banned. The movie was banned.
I've seen it.
It's on Netflix.
I own
Yeah,
it.
it's on the beginning.
It was bad. It wasn't
Yeah.
bad. It was bad.
Yeah, they took it down.
But I
so
mean,
it
but
kind of-
Sony took it down. The overall.
It was not.
I own the movie. It's not bad.
I
I just mean they took it down.
It wasn't banned. They had alternative means of
Yeah.
releasing
I
it.
just think it's like a complete false equivalency because like a threat from North Korea is not a threat from Russia. Because I mean like North Korea, we could fight them and beat them in like a couple days probably. Probably not.
But no, actually,
No, we
Best
could,
military in the world.
North-
They're both from the-
no, we could fight them. North Korea and Russia war are not even equivalent.
Yeah,
But
I'm
they're
going to have to
trying to
side with
support-
us
I
on
never
this one,
understood
guys.
that.
if anything, North Korea
I mean,
was
it's not like bad military, but it's not even close to the best, I would say. But I mean, it's irrelevant, but I just think it's a complete false equivalency.
Yeah.
Personally.
But more to the point of what Shane was trying to get at for you, Dakota, was when he says flesh an argument out, make an assertion about North Korea, give us a warrant and some analysis of what you're trying to say, and then give it impact. Say what it means to that question. See? And don't just say North Korea and leave it at that. And for your refutation, remember the 4 steps. And you say, Ahmad said, I disagree because, and then explain it. And say, therefore, we really do have to offer the Ukraine membership. See? So make it a little more encapsulated, your refutation. Yeah.
Alright, so just speaking more to your reputation as well. The POIs, you understand, like, you don't want to, especially you don't want to take a POI and then take a follow-up POI, right? And because then you're just giving way too much time. You're allowing them to clarify maybe a bad POI that they put out. Yeah, you do. You had a POI and then an immediate, let them back in with a follow-up POI to clarify that position. If they didn't get it right the first time, that's on them. Like, you were nice enough to give them 15 seconds. If they wasted it, tough shit. We're moving on. So, I mean, that's kind of the attitude you need to take, is that this is my 7 minutes up here. I'm going to give you my case I'll let you get it a couple seconds in, but if you screw that up or you squander that time, that's on you. So, that being said, your responses to the POIs I thought were fine. I thought, you handled them well. You just don't want to do too much of it, right? So, do you have a point back there, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just for my own thing with signposting, like my flow is pretty, I don't really know what your new points were, if I'm being honest. Just because, I just think that it's also like my fault for sure, but I think signposting would definitely help for you especially.
Yeah, it kind of screwed me up when the POIs came in because they
No,
didn't
definitely
cover
not.
my points for those games.
No, yeah, I mean, it definitely happens. It's like not your fault, but yeah, I just say at least in the beginning, maybe give like if you're gonna have 2 points or 3 points. So maybe like, if you do get thrown off, I still have a kind of general outline of like what's gonna happen that I can flow.
So if you say, I'm going to do some refutation, then 2 new points of analysis. And then when you finish your refutation, say, now on my new points, see. Then he knows where you are, see.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And especially as a second speaker too, you don't need to have 3 points. I mean, even 1 new point of information is sufficient, especially if you're going to spend a lot of time on refutation. Just 1 new point or a further expansion on what your partner's already brought to us, that's sufficient. So, but you want to make sure that you highlight that and say, okay, moving on to my case, or as my partner was bringing to you, let me expand on that. Highlight it to us that this is your extension, and that you're moving away from refutation, right? All right. So, do you have anything else, Professor?
No.
All right. So we'll move over to opening opposition. Go back up here. So mod. Okay. So. Most of your case was basically refutation, right? I mean, there wasn't a lot of new material that was brought out. I mean, you guys are the first to announce this idea of World War III, right? And while I get the side, I see SciGov's complaint with this. Why is this a necessary conclusion? Why is it going to lead to World War III necessarily, right? But I think that's kind of on your side. That's your fault, because you're not providing the warrants or the impacts of why that's necessarily going to happen. So, I mean, for example, you could point to the fact that, this is the final step, and now there will be no buffer zone between Ukraine and between the West and Russia. So they're going to feel boxed in, they're going to have no other choice, and they're going to have to go to war. And that war is going to necessarily escalate because of the size of the forces involved. Boom, boom, boom. Follow me down the line of how this leads to World War III. Just don't make the assertion that it's going to lead to World War III, because then it appears hyperbolic, right? I mean, you're just. It's easily refuted from their side. They're going, "Oh, you guys are just, throwing out World War III and apocalypse and nuclear war," and it's just as easy to dismiss something if you don't provide warrants and links to actually back that claim up. Let's see. Once again, took a couple too many POIs. I mean, you want to keep that down. And you also had this, POI followed by a response followed by a follow-up POI where you allowed them to clarify, why is this something we should be concerned about?
And that makes you look weak.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to do that. And then you had this point of plan perpetuates the idea of spreading democracy, right? Which I think is a good plan. I mean, not a good plan. It's a good point. I wish you would signpost things like that. I didn't think, spreading democracy. Okay. Let me move to my first point. I'm going to talk to you about the idea of spreading democracy, and then get into that. And flesh out the warrant. Give me the reasons why. So you use the example of Iran and Iraq, right? Which I think are 2 good examples. They're from 2 vastly different time periods. But you have to assume that the judge isn't going to understand, that we overthrew the government in Iran in 1953, and then what has played out since then. So you have to give us a brief 10-second synopsis of that. Hey, we overthrew the government of Iran in 1953. How did that work out for us? The 1979 revolution. Or you can go just straight to Iraq and say, we can look at the 2003 invasion of Iraq. How did that work out? We disposed of Saddam Hussein and try to spread democracy, and it goes nowhere, and it just devolves into chaos.
You break it, you own it. And boy, do we own it.
And then we get the idea, sorry, I'm going to have to pick on you a little bit here, the idea that this whole plan will harm the U.S.'s reputation. We don't got much of a reputation to harm right now. we're not on a lot of Christmas gift lists, let's put it that way. So I would just be careful with that idea because it comes across a bit as jingoistic. You know what I mean by that? That just self-congratulatory behavior on the U.S. That we're so great here, we don't want to harm our reputation when you're not taking into account that around the world, people don't really necessarily view us that way, especially in this region, especially based on our involvement and, as Professor Miller was saying, our promises that we've made to Ukraine that we haven't really backed up, and I mean, we're already not scoring a lot of points, so just be careful of those arguments. Professor, do you have anything for him?
Yeah, just, Ahmad, more confidence. Practice waving off. And I know you're a South Campus major, but you really need to read the articles on the website and to have more knowledge infused into your speeches about Ukraine and what's going on and NATO and you know, you have good ideas and some good warrants, but then let's throw in some evidence here and there. Let's show that you're well read and you know something. You know, that's going to enhance your credibility. I agree with Shane. It was mostly a refutational speech and very little new matter, and that was kind of problematic. You know, but the other thing is, I'd like to just see. I've seen you, for example, in Indiana with a delivery that's much more forceful and confident. I don't know where that went. I don't know. Maybe it's you left it in the hospital. I don't know. But let's see some more confidence from you, because you seem hesitant and shaky up there. You know.
Yeah. Just shake it off the rust, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Whatever. But you seemed hesitant.
Well, I want to give you a specific point too.
Okay.
And I see you back there. I'll get back to you. Let me make this point real quick. So, like, your case is a perfect example of why you need to use signposts, right? Because at the end of your case, you tried to provide this summary of, you know, so what have I brought you today, right? And then you have basically a word salad where you try to, you know, quickly encompass everything that you've said in the prior 5 minutes of your speech, right? But if you have signposts, you don't have to do that. You can just say, you know, signpost A, signpost B, signpost C. You know what I mean? And you can quickly refer to them. So that's the importance of signposting. It's not just to help me follow as the judge, but it helps you when you're in that summary part of your case of, you know, like, tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them, right? I mean, everybody does that. But if you don't have clear, concise signposts, you can't do that. Because you just end up having to explain your entire case again in just this condensed version, and it just comes out as a word salad. Right, so you got something you want to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add just in general for the whole debate, like, don't make claims that you don't back up. Like, you said that war, you specifically said that war would be really undesirable because it would hurt the economy. But especially if we consider the U.S., war has always helped the economy pretty much. So you gotta back things like that up.
I think that only happened in World War II, but
Yeah.
it happened that one time actually.
Sorry?
But
The economy was only helped in the U.S. because of World War II. That's like
World
literally.
War I.
well, I would just say for Theodore's point, just in general, we do want to support our points.
That's
with
not
that.
necessarily true.
Okay, good.
He said Soviet government?
Yes,
It's like a small thing.
Kremlin,
Yeah, I mean, you still call it Kremlin. Just like, yeah, it's not the Soviet government, but that's like, it's like a minor thing. It's not a big
I mean,
deal.
I'm not gonna hold that against anybody.
No,
Just
just
terminology. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you can use the right terminology, obviously that's preferable.
Yeah.
It makes you sound,
Yeah,
you know,
Kremlin's
more
correct.
split up on the topic.
Yeah.
Also, I
Kremlin's
want
correct.
to comment, which I'm not sure, but you said anyways a lot, and I'm not sure if after you say your argument, then you say anyways, aren't you taking away from that argument? Like, you know, I said this, but anyway, don't matter.
I think that just comes back to the rust, though. Because I mean, like I've seen you do it. You know what I mean? We went to nationals together last year, so you just need to shake that off. You need to get back into that point where you're willing to get up here and make an assertion and stand behind it 100%, right? So I think you're gonna be okay. Right. So moving on to Shireen. And this is your first speech in BP, right? So we had a brief discussion on that, and we were very impressed by your first speech. Like, for that being your first speech, that was quite impressive. I mean, there's definitely some things that you need to work on. For example, I'd like to see a little bit of taking what you have as signposts and making them more into signposts as opposed to sentences. Something that really 3 or 4 words would be ideal. Just 3 or 4 words of, instead of, offering membership will isolate Russia. You can just talk about the isolation of Russia, or how this plan will isolate Russia. You know what I mean? It's just anything that you can do to shrink that down, to make it snappier, to make it peppier, to make it, like a real good, as Professor uses the line, slug line. The better you can do that, the better off you're going to be. Feel free to wave down POIs. You definitely want to stick to maybe one, maybe 2. I mean, 2 is okay. Anything more than 2, you're kind of running the risk. So just don't be afraid to just wave them down. You don't have to say no thank you. You don't have to acknowledge them. You don't even have to pretend they exist. Just
practice the wave.
So, let's see. You had something you want to say?
Yeah, honestly, it actually hurt. You had a lot of good stuff. I really like the speech. And you'd have all these great progressions of how you're showing exactly this led to this led to this, and then you just completely stop and take the POI. And it's just hurt. Because you're such a good train of thought, and then you interrupt it with this POI. So even if you are going to take it, if you're short on time or something, which you shouldn't, but even if you are, just at least wait till you're done explaining what you're explaining, because it really matters. Also, when you respond, make eye contact with me. Just because you're responding to me as the judge, you're not having the conversation with them. But
until time, don't feel it.
Yes,
the protocol is
the always, even if you're up here giving a speech, you know what I mean? You're never talking to the other side. You're never going to convince them in a million years. They are paid opposition to you. Their entire life is depending on proving you wrong. So who cares what they have to say? Who cares what they
how
mean?
they look? They can make faces at you, whatever.
What matters is us in the back. So when you're giving the POI, direct it to us. When you're responding to a POI, respond to us. And when you're giving your speech, obviously, give your speech to us, because we're the ones that you're trying to convince. We're the independent minds in the back saying, how do we want to weigh this out? And both sides are trying to convince us. And I think that's good for everyone to take in no mind. It's just, it doesn't matter about the other side. You are here to convince the judges, and that is it. That being said, obviously, you weren't super spun up on this topic. I mean, you said before the round, you didn't know a lot about Ukraine, so that's okay. I think you did fine for not knowing a lot about it. I mean, and sometimes there are going to be cases where you're going to have to, pardon my French, but bullshit your way through rounds because you're just not spun up on it. Your arguments about, status quo solving, providing solvency for this, and that, NATO is already backing Ukraine is kind of a weak argument, but I mean, that's just, will come with more knowledge on this. But the more important things, the things that, a lot of teams suffer from and that hold people back as far as structuring your case, the way that you structure your refutation, the way you just present yourself and handle yourself up here and demonstrate, ease of speaking was awesome for your first one. So, good job. Professor, do you have anything?
I really like you're comfortable in your own skin, and you present well, and that was good. No pen in your hand, please. Stay in the power stance, feet like a tripod. I'm like Austin. I'm watching you make a point. I'm waiting for you just to get to the impact, and somebody stands up, and you go, "Okay, what do you want?" And I'm going, "Oh fuck." Why did you stop there? And it was very frustrating. I would like you to be thinking of the counterpoint or side that you're taking, that you're hammering home to Shane, that you're saying, and that's why we don't want to offer membership to the Ukraine. No, that's why we want to keep, keep them out of NATO. No, Ukraine and NATO. And, remember your position and lock it into 3 simple words. Ukraine out of NATO, and so that that's your go-to place. I think, look, this will come, there's that little tape where the professor talked about some of these points when you have knowledge, but most of your arguments were defensive and not offensive, and you'll get that when you have more knowledge base of the subject, they can become more offensive, and you can speak to more topics that you know something about and so forth. So, but 3-word slug lines are really practice getting those down, because you're a little wordy. But overall, it was you're compelling as a speaker to listen to, and that's hard to teach. It's hard to coach and teach. You had that naturally, which was good. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you mentioned Boko Haram as a country twice, which I thought was But no, I mean, other than that, I thought your arguments were along the right lines. I just think you could probably benefit by looking at them and going, so what, and asking yourself how, why, so what.
I have a question. Is there a site, or a pros and cons site? Or something?
There is actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one for high school. That she's pretty good.
Pros and cons on what? On Ukraine?
Current, or is there certain topics that we'll probably see this weekend, so I can just look it up then?
Yeah. Are you on our Facebook?
I just
Join your speech, because I keep up on current events, and usually anything that's in the current events are going to come up. We're going to see something on ISIS. We're going to see something.
So what would it be about ISIS? What do you think?
Should we wipe them out? Military. Afterwards, we'll talk about that. Let's finish the critique.
All right. So just overall, though, I think one of the things that you guys would have been better off running, and this kind of will feed into a NICA speech, is we get this POI in a NICA speech of what type of aid is being offered by the plan, right? And we get this from both back half of so what type of aid is going to be offered to Ukraine by their membership in NATO.
Yeah.
And I think if you guys were more spun up on the topic, then you guys could have made the more nuanced, stronger argument that, one, membership is inherently military aid.
Yeah.
Okay? If you join NATO, the entire point of NATO is that it is a mutually assured defense pact.
Yeah.
So if you attack one NATO nation, you're attacking all NATO nations. So that's the problem, is that you can make an argument that Russia is already currently attacking Ukraine, right? I mean, at a bare minimum, at the very bare minimum, they're financing rebel troops that are trying to attack civilians and trying to capture ground in eastern Ukraine. If Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, that would necessarily trigger a U.S. response and a U.S. defense, if we're going to follow the rules of what membership of NATO means. So therefore, government's plan necessarily results in war today. As soon as they become part of NATO, then we have to go to war, and we have to back them up. And it really leaves the U.S. with only two options, which would flow well into your back half's, lose-lose scenario, is that one, we don't do anything, which really would shit on our reputation. Because while we might not have a great worldwide reputation, our reputation with NATO is pretty flawless, and we're pretty dependent upon it. So we don't defend Ukraine, then NATO falls apart. If we do defend Ukraine, then we're in a hot war with Russia. Either one of those are bad. So, I think that's kind of where you guys should have been going. Yeah.
So I don't want to waste time, but I just want to throw this out there as would this work as an argument? Could you bring up that it's not really fair to NATO countries to taking Ukraine now? Because it's kind of NATO's kind of an insurance thing, right? Where it's if one of us gets attacked, you guys all defend. Ukraine's coming in just because they're being attacked, so you're making all these countries go in and have to fight them.
That's kind of why a lot of the nations joined NATO in the first place, though.
Because they all being attacked.
Well, because not necessarily they were being attacked, but they were under the threat of it.
On the verge, yeah.
Ukraine is actually, so if Ukraine joins, all those countries will inherently go and fight because Ukraine's already under attack by Russia.
Right, but if they don't want Ukraine to join, they get a voting partnership in as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like that's what I was kind of pointing to again is that U.S. can't unilaterally offer Ukraine this membership.
I'm saying, but if this was if it was not Ukraine, if they just were to accept, could you make that that argument that it's not fair to the other NATO countries?
I suppose, yeah. Because what is Ukraine bringing to the table? They don't really have a strong military. So what are we getting out of it as NATO? You could certainly make that argument.
Yeah. What's the impact of either giving NATO to the Ukraine or not is my final question to that argument. Where does that fit into whether we should offer it to them or not?
It matters for this because it's just offering a spot. But if it were accept them into NATO or something like that, would that work? I don't know.
I think there's something there. I really do. I think there is something there of, on balance, what do we get from offering Ukraine membership in NATO? Right. So okay, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Let's move on.
One more quick thing for Shereen. Example that you weren't here. but were you here for the professor's talk? So you heard him, maybe you don't remember this, but he talked about the fact that when Russia agreed to break up the Soviet Union, it was with the promise, this promise from Secretary Baker that Ukraine wasn't going to go into NATO. And, here you're breaking a big effing promise, once again. Provocative promise, right?
And Georgia, too.
And so this is using knowledge you just picked up last night and thrusting it into the debate and using it that way.
Alright, so let's move on to the back half. This will be a lot quicker. Obviously, I don't have much to say. I mean, you're a fellow poli-sci major, so when you start bringing out shit like democratic peace theory, I can't really argue with that.
I didn't explain it very well, but...
I know, but you know your audience, and you just drop democratic peace theory, and they're like, well, shit, okay, you win. So, let's see. No, I mean, once again, your reputation's spot on point. The one thing that I did want to point out, though, is obviously your response to POI of what type of aid is being offered by this plan. I mean, you were kind of trying to dance around it, and it's like...
But that's because opening Gov said it was not going to be military. They said it wasn't going to be, so I said it's not necessarily going to be.
Right.
I know. That seemed a little sleazy.
Yeah, here's
seemed
the thing.
a little wishy-washy.
So I should have sniped and said, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think you should have.
No, but it was tricky.
Here's the thing, and that's a conversation I wanted to have with you, because it's like I could see that, is that a knife? Is it not?
Yeah.
Right? I don't think it's a knife, and I'll tell you why, because it's factual. Like, I mean, if opening government, not to say that you said this, but if opening government gets up here and argues, the sky is green, and you come out and say the sky is blue, that's not knifing.
I disagree, because people consider it knives when you go, okay, so for example, really quick, just the round that we had at Point Loma, given the synthetic ingredients thing, when Opening Gov went up there and agreed that GMOs and vitamins count as food and beverages that have synthetic ingredients. That is factually incorrect, but I know they would have marked us, given us the 4 for knife.
It's factually more correct than the statement that NATO membership doesn't necessarily imply military. I mean, NATO is a military organization. I mean, I guess you're saying. I mean, it's a fine line, and you got to try to walk it. I would like to see you come.
I see where you're coming from.
That's my preference.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, just take it.
Completely different again. Like that's like a whole definition thing. And if they both already agreed on a definition of it, then it's like you're completely knifing. But I think this was it was more minor of a knife, really.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it was definitely.
I can't speak for all judges. I mean, at me as a judge, if you would have come up and said that no, this is an inherent part of the defense pact, I wouldn't hold that against you, and I certainly wouldn't hold it as you're knifing opening government, because you're just bringing clarity to the argument, right? And especially when you're getting attacked from this side about, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to do military? Or are you going to do financial aid? What kind of aid are you going to offer?
Yeah, I should.
You just kind of resolve that problem and skirt that to the side so you can get to the inherent.
I get it.
Yeah.
That's just my feeling. Once again, just take it under advice. I really don't have much else to add. I mean, Professor, what do you have?
Yeah.
I thought it was a pretty good...
I have a small point, which I've stated before, but I'll keep ramming it at you until you change. It annoys me that you waste the first most precious moments of your speech, the first 15 seconds, on procedurals instead of your best, super greatest point that you're going to win the debate on. Because watch the tape. You start on housekeeping instead of going to your best point.
You mean I should start with rebuttal?
Yeah. Start with like what your partner, kind of thing your partner usually does, which he starts off with some little, this is what's going to win us the debate. Flower. This issue, I'm making this up now, but this issue of democracy, let's just say that was going to be the group, is going to be the fundamental voting issue. Now, and then go to your preview, and now I'm going to do some points of refutation, and then 2 new matters.
I just have a lot to get through, so
I hate to see you waste that, because remember, your judge's ultimate listening and looking at you is in those first few moments, and I don't want you wasting it on procedurals. I liked your refutation and your argumentation. It was good. It was really good. Your nonverbal and everything. I saw you were internally worried about your answer as you were giving it. on the knifing issue.
Oh,
yeah. So.
And then the one thing that I did have a concern was, is it seems like the last point in your case, this idea of that NATO was more successful in Afghanistan because of the involvement of NATO and there was an international effort. It seemed almost a bit refutation-y of it.
Oh, really?
Like, it seemed like the way that it was structured, like, I would have preferred to see, I mean, speaking to my political science bent, like, that would have been a great place for you to really expand on the idea of democratic peace theory, and that would give you, your side, a huge advantage into why we should offer Ukraine this membership, right? I mean, because if you can get up there and give a brief idea of what democratic peace theory is and how well it's been demonstrated over
I guess for me, maybe I didn't make it clear, but the point for that second point was more focusing on the fact that we don't want the U.S. to act unilaterally on this.
Right,
so
exactly.
It was, I mean, I guess the reason I didn't talk about democratic peace theory in that point is because I wasn't.
No, I'm saying replace the two. No, I'm not saying incorporate it, because the idea that. Because I get what your second point was, that we don't want to go this unilateral, we want a multilateral approach, that it's much more successful. That almost seems refutational to me. I mean, it's just the way that it's structured, because it's, if nothing else, it's a preemptive refutation, right? I mean, of that, hey, look, we need this to be a multilateral affair. We don't want to just have it be U.S. involvement. You're trying to kind of define the case in your area. I just think that time would have been better spent on generating a unique advantage for your side of the house. And you had it. You had democratic peace theory, which is this very strong piece of evidence that says, like, look, if we put Ukraine in NATO, we're going to have tangible benefits for the world out of this. And I think that just makes your case stronger, especially with judges that are looking for that type of evidence.
One offense. I would just add one last thing for Professor Patrick's thing about you having too much refutation and not enough new matter and offense. I thought you had a better allocation.
I was down by 2.5.
Yeah.
That was,
no, you definitely didn't overdo it on the reputation. That's why I said I didn't have much to offer.
That was good.
I thought your reputation was fine.
Did you
I'm working on it, I guess.
Okay.
I
like the
reputation thing though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you stopped reputation about 2 minutes in. So.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's move to Shaw.
Are you going to skip Danny or are you?
No, we're going to get to them.
Okay.
Go.
Oh, you're doing it that way.
Okay. Austin's all ready to go. Please go ahead.
I mean, okay, so
he's covering up his face.
You have differing opinions from everyone on this thing. So not everyone agrees with me, but I'm like, even though I may I don't know, I'm like very rude in person. And first I can say, I do not think debate should be vulgar. I do not think debate should be rude or anything. And I thought that it was just way too rude. And then the thing I really didn't like is if you're going to be rude, back it up and go all the way.
Yeah.
And he said, this debate was pointless, you have nothing productive, and then you go back and back up what they said in the first speech. And don't do that. If you're going to knife like that, which was blatantly saying everything they said was just wrong, and then go back to it at the end, which I guess you're supposed to do, but then you just said before that it's all stupid. So then why should I even listen to it? And that's just me because I didn't like the whole rudeness in general. But I mean, I guess some judges will not like it like me, and some judges, I think almost everyone else on the panel will not mind it at all.
I don't.
So yeah, I mean, it's totally a personal preference, but
I like your little bit of cheekiness.
The line you gotta walk.
I think a little cheekiness goes a long ways. I mean, you're on that line, right?
Yeah, I
as long as he knows he's on the line, that's all that matters.
I think that this is the most it's been to going a little too far.
What is it? Are you aware of it, or is this natural? Did you not eat dinner tonight, or why are you so hungry, or why you seem more tonight than I've seen you before? More abrasive toward them than
before. You
before.
seem dissatisfied.
Dissatisfied. Why were you more dissatisfied?
Okay, that's fine.
You just were?
No,
let's move into your case.
Okay, let's talk about what you did.
Okay, so you as a whip, you decided to run a background case. Background case. Not a great strategic move, right? Because it's cool, thanks for the information, but you're not really advancing any argumentation. So, I mean, obviously in a practice round, that's why I think I got the feeling that you were just a little dissatisfied with the way the debate had gone. You were just kind of hold on, let me correct a lot of things. So I know this is a topic that you're really spun up on. So, I can understand the desire or the impetus to do that.
And it was good education-wise.
It was good education-wise. Like I
sat
sat there and I enjoyed your speech very well, but as far as the way that it flowed into the rest of the round, it really didn't. It was kind of like 7 people debating, and then Vishal had his like little sidebar for 7 minutes. So
I'm gonna go. Sorry. Like once again, like you have the whole thing about like how there's no clash, you're not doing anything, and then you give just the most tangential speech ever, which just like made it even less clashy. I just did not understand.
Well, I want to say one thing. I want to say one thing about Vishal's speech, which I want everyone, especially the new people, to watch it when you get the YouTube link tonight. Watch it again, because one of the things that it was packed full of, whether you realize it or not, was he slipped in a lot of facts and a lot of knowledge about the situation. And he did it seamlessly. It wasn't a pretentious like, oh, Professor who said this. He just slipped in a lot of information. And I liked that a lot. And I don't agree with Austin that all of it was irrelevant. I don't think it was. But, okay. So go on. You can go ahead.
All right, so I think you had some good points, though, that I would have liked to have seen come out probably at an Anika speech, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so like the idea is that sanctions are what causing this impatience for Russia. It's what's forcing their hand to act in eastern Ukraine and to do things like to try to take Crimea, right? Because they're just being impatient because of the effects of the sanctions. I think that's a strong argument, and I think that's something that wasn't brought out at all in the front half, like even a little bit, and we get it as the last speaker.
It would be new matter, right? If I bring
It's okay. I feel like it was okay, since only because you were going.
Yeah, if you would have given that speech on OpWhip, that's an auto thing, because there was clearly new material. However, while it's looked down upon from GovWhip, it's certainly not an auto 4 for GovWhip to bring in new material. Try to avoid it. That's why I'm saying I would have preferred to have seen it in Anika's speech and then have you expand on it. You know what I mean? Even just a briefest of mention from your member speech. Then when the whip gets up, you can expand on it all you want, and it's not new material because you're just expanding. You're providing that extension. So I think you'd have been fine on that. Russia is not a democratic nation. They will try to spread this value to their neighboring states. Once again, that's a unique advantage that this plan helps stave off, right? But it's something that doesn't get enunciated until the very end of your speech. That stuff needs to be headlines. That needs to be like top list stuff, right?
But I never thought democracy would be such an important issue.
I know, it came out of the woodwork, didn't it?
Yeah. Even the first speaking, democracy, the first argument.
I think any time that we ever get into a discussion about U.S. and Russia, I think it's pretty fair to assume that freedom and democracy and all these ideals are going to get brought up.
Yes, but that shouldn't be the
It should. I agree. I think that we should focus more on the international ramifications on it, and how does this affect the global community, and all those things. Like, I agree with you on that, but you just got to expect that, especially when you're going up against other people that aren't as split up on this topic as you are, they're going to have the tendency to want to fall back to those same stereotypes that have been trotted out since the Cold War. We're the bastions of freedom, and we're going to defend liberty, and Russia's the bad, evil guys trolling their mustaches.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's never going to change. That being said, I think you're a great speaker. I think this just wasn't. You seemed a little frustrated. So. That's
Are you done with it?
Yeah, I'm done.
I think if you were going to go that way, if you were going to really go into it ad hominem, you could have did like the professor started his. You were here for his lecture, right? Go ahead and compare Putin with Hitler the way Hillary Clinton did, and go all the way. I mean, he's doing the same tactics that Hitler did during World War II. 30 years.
I thought, I was like, I'll mention that in my speech, then I didn't. And then I thought of it again, and I was like, okay, you'll mention it.
You'll mention it, And I would like to see you, I've said this to you before, if you're going to run this thing like, these people over there are so confused and messed up, now let me straighten it out. Let me make this thing real clear. Then maybe try that. Let me answer 3 questions, and let me see you experiment with the 3 questions and answer the 3 questions and crystallize the debate that way as the whip. Play with that kind of thing. If I don't know if you've seen the Harvard in the on the tape thing. The year that Harvard won the thing, the Yale, the whip speech in there was pretty good with answering some questions that way. But I'd like to see you play with that, especially if you're going to do the setup like, God, was this a messed up debate? Because the 3 questions really makes it clear then.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you guys have anything in the back? All right. So let's move on to Danny, who's not here, so we can all pick
On tape, everyone.
yeah.
That's that.
Well, we'll see if he actually watches this.
Yeah. Hi, Danny.
So Danny, if you are watching this, put clothes on, for God's sakes.
What? He's watching his critiques.
Well, maybe he likes to watch it myself.
Okay.
Reputation was fine. I didn't see anything necessarily too bad with it.
Yeah.
Once again, suffers from taking too many POIs. And there were some strategic points that I didn't see get advanced. Specifically one that there's 2 points that I really want to hit on, and then I'll kind of turn it over to the rest of the room to see what you guys thought. We had this idea coming out, the end of his reputation that, this is going to lead to World War III, right? And then you get a POI from Anika of like, how is this going to lead to World War III? And all we can get out of him is wanting to expand. But here's the thing, is that nobody wanted World War II. Nobody wanted World War I. Yeah. These are things that just happen. Like, they start off small, they start off with something stupid, like admitting Ukraine to NATO, and that pisses off Russia. So Russia says, hey, you know what? If you're going to do that, then fine. We're going to take eastern Ukraine, and we're going to make that part of our sphere of influence. And then the Cold War gets kicked up again. And then somebody launches a missile. And next thing you know, shit spirals out of control, and we're in World War III. It doesn't necessarily need to be the driving goal of Russia to engage in World War III for that to be a possible disadvantage. These things just happen. I'm certain that Germany didn't want to invite the whole world to attack them at the same time during World War II. They were trying to take it one country at a time.
Yeah.
Shit didn't work out well for them. So, yeah, go ahead.
One thing is, like, they have a really good point that came up about, like, how if we have this war, we're going to lose U.S. lives. And this topic is about the U.S., so that's, like, a big factor. And then you tie that to, like, and that's bad in the public eye, which I thought was like kind of taking away from the point, because like, I mean, yeah, it's bad in the public eye, but like that's not nearly as important as the fact that we're losing American lives directly. So I thought that should have been like, that end part kind of drew away from the whole impact of just losing lives in general. The other, two other things, one was just that like we have the whole thing about arming rebels, and I guess there's the whole like gray area we kind of talked about in the deliberation where like, yeah, but like we kind of armed the rebels in the beginning, and now everyone's kind of rebels, and it's like a whole thing.
Yeah.
And the last thing is they said how like the leader of Iran is Ahmadinejad. He's the most radical leader like ever. I mean, he's like not Pol Pot, and also he's not the leader anymore.
Okay, that's my second point. Danny, Ahmadinejad is not the president of Iran. It hasn't been for quite some time. It's President Rouhani. So just oh my God, I can't believe
he's more moderate than
so much more moderate than Ahmadinejad. So if you are watching this, please everybody learn Ahmadinejad has not been president of Iran for quite some time.
Anybody else? Okay,
yeah, I
Theodore?
want to say one thing. That he mentioned that if they offered Ukraine membership in NATO, that would lead to people hating the U.S. Something like that. And I was just like, who cares?
Oh, and also the other thing I think I was trying to get in towards the end of Danny's speech and also Justin's speech was that if we don't have NATO intervening, are we advocating for the U.S. to intervene, or are we advocating for nothing? Because if we're not advocating for NATO, and we're not advocating for nothing, which is something Michelle brought up, we can't have, we're not advocating for nothing, then we've got to advocate for something. We're not advocating NATO, then it's going to be probably the U.S. And all of the harms that you're talking about are worse with the U.S.
Yeah. Right.
But NATO, that's the thing, NATO can still do whatever they want, even if the country's not NATO. Like, I mean, like NATO almost never attacks, never invades countries that like.
But that's what I'm saying.
NATO
it's like better if Ukraine's a part of NATO because then the other countries will actually want to.
It's more automatic and more.
Yeah.
Like
I
don't know. Like I'm not like a huge like history person understanding.
In this current situation, Ukraine being part of NATO is
Yugoslavia, the Serb
pretty important because Ukraine feels that they're under attack by Russia, right? And NATO's a defense.
Right.
I mean, certainly you're right that NATO doesn't necessarily need to have somebody be a member to be involved. I mean, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, we've gone into plenty of countries with NATO that weren't part of NATO. But I mean, with this particular topic, the whole point of admitting Ukraine into NATO is that they would necessarily gain that mutually assured destruction, essentially, that comes along with attacking a fellow NATO member state.
And also, I think this point should have been introduced by NEP, that the runt of Ukraine, which remains, apart from Crimea and all of those eastern territories, is much more aligned with Western liberal values and NATO as an organization itself, and therefore becomes a natural ally and a natural member of NATO. I mean, membership is more natural than forced of sorts for Ukraine to.
Before we completely degenerate, let me throw some. Yeah, we have one more. Let me throw a couple real quick things at Danny. I loved your point that Russia is a fairly formidable war machine, and they have good technology. And what I was waiting for this side more to argue was they also have nukes. And I was waiting for the nuke debate to somehow.
But that's what I kept trying to ask. I was like,
I know.
What does Russia seek to gain from going like engaging in nuclear warfare over Ukraine? Like Russia stands is going to lose everything. Like,
Yeah, I know. And then the other thing is.
No, I agree with you. I don't think that the nuke argument. I'm so hesitant to ever give any weight to a nuke.
Yeah, and the other thing is, it sounds like you're going back to NPDA, where everything goes to nuclear war.
If we pass this plan to raise taxes on cigarettes, it's obviously going to
lead to nuclear war. And then the final thing, Danny, is lose the hat at the tournament. Thank you.
Justin,
okay, Justin, let's hear Justin's
critique. All right, Justin, man, you are getting better and better at every speech.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I mean, not to crap on anybody else here, but I am continually impressed by how you're incorporating all this information in. I mean, you start off this plan. You get up here and you start off your speech with this basically a maxim of this plan is trying to end a conflict by escalating it, which doesn't work. Which is a great great maxim. And then everything else follows below that, right? So then you're like, okay, now that I've got that point out there, this big point, this big value that I want to get across, then you get into your refutation, which you really didn't get that much into. I think that you were trying to engage on a weak area. Mm-hmm. I understand that Traeger's big on that, economic sanctions aren't really hurting Russia that much, but they kind of are, obviously. I mean, they're having some effect.
Yeah.
But then you get into your case, and, lose-lose situation, worst case scenario, Your second tagline wasn't that great. It was a little bit long, but, once again, the point was there, that this, we can help without directly, challenging Putin and challenging this idea of, trying to rebuild the Russian Federation, right?
Yeah.
Just everything was very well laid out. I thought it was a very good speech. The one downside that I would say, though, is that this felt more like a member's speech to me. You have this reputation, then you advance your ideas, but your speech should be more about summation, right? It should be more about what's already been brought to you and why you should win based off of that. And maybe that's because the arguments that you wanted to put forth didn't really get put out in front of you, and you're just kind of trying to fix that work in the background.
Yeah.
Which, if it is, that's so be it. But, I would still encourage you to try to play with the ideas of, the 3 questions, or, strong argument, weak argument. Either one of those, anything that will push your speech more in the direction of being the closer, of getting up and saying, hey, we've listened to 7 people get up here and tell you why or why not Ukraine should join NATO. I'm going to settle it for you and tell you why they shouldn't, and why we shouldn't even dream of allowing it. And then point to the arguments that have already been put out and be more of a, wrap it up for them. You know what I mean? Because when you get
be
done your
the
speech,
closer.
Yeah, because when you finish your speech, it doesn't feel like the debate is over. It feels like, okay, thank you for your speech. We'll move on to the next speaker.
Another speech.
Like as a whip, like it should feel done. Like make your decision, judge. This is on you, and that could easily be fixed with just the last 30 seconds of directly addressing the speaker. Say, Mr. Speaker, please recognize, and really hit home and hard on the summary and on balance why your side should win. Mr. Speaker, please recognize it. On balance, not only facing a lose-lose situation, we're facing the worst case scenario on both sides if we go forward with government's plan. Therefore, if you're rational in the slightest bit, and if you value human life, you have to vote opposition. And thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Boom, walk away. That feels like the end to a debate. It doesn't feel like you're leaving room for other speakers to get up and add to it. You know what I mean? You want to close everything off. Your structure is bang up, though. I have nothing to complain about your structure. Do you guys have anything?
I have one real quick thing. You're getting. I agree. You're getting better every time.
Every time.
You're much too experienced to interrupt your arguments for POIs, and watch yourself on the tape. You do. You interrupt your arguments, especially just before the input.
Except for us.
What? What? Just watch it, and you'll see. You interrupt your answer to take a question, and then shorter taglines is my only other suggestion. You're just a little wordy. You could be a little harder hitting.
That was just the second
harder
one.
hitting.
The first and third though
they were
great.
good. Yeah, they were good.
Situation, worst case scenarios, like those were great.
Yeah, but other than that, good. You're real good. Getting stronger every time. The practice is paying off. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You guys have anything else you guys want to contribute?
Okay, thanks everyone. Good practice. Thanks for making the cookies. Can we thank her again? Yeah.
Take them with you.
Yes, please take all the cookies with you.
Next time we have it around?
Oh, what?
Maybe off whip next time we have it around?
Yeah, sure. Do you have some models you've been looking at on tape?
No, I always do questions.
Always do questions.
Well, not necessarily questions, I do issues. Like 3 major things, like 3 points of clash. I just pick 3 or 4 points of clash and I just do those.
Okay, good.
That's what I always do.
Try turning them into questions. See how
They usually are questions, like what is the real effect of this? Like what is this going to do? Or like the real story. Yeah, that's usually what I do. I don't know.
Okay, good.
Professor, could I change my email on your contact list?
Yeah.
To something simpler?
Yeah, see ya. Thank you. So,
Oh, you dropped $1.
Not to cut you off, but that was what I wanted to tell everyone.
$1.